want to welcome in now former federal prosecutor Neama Rahmani. As you follow this case, it really is horrifying as the prosecution pieces together the puzzle for the judge in this bench trial and the evidence they have. New this morning is this video of a man dressed in black carrying a white cup on the trail at the same time that Laken Riley disappeared on her run. And you also see her running. What do you make of the prosecution's case thus far and the evidence they've presented to the judge?
Marnie, it's an incredibly strong case consisting of video evidence that you talked about, the digital evidence of Jose Ibarra's cell phone, and then the forensic evidence that I expect to be introduced today to really wrap up this case nicely for the state with a bow. And that's going to be, of course, Ibarra's DNA and his fingerprint on Riley's cell phone. So really not much of a defense here. As a former prosecutor, we call these long guilty pleas. I expect the defense to put on a very short defense, try to attack some of the forensics, but we should get a guilty verdict in this case probably as early as tomorrow. That's how quickly this case is moving.
You know, I think that if there were a jury in the room and you think of beyond a reasonable doubt, and the defense sort of alludes to the idea that maybe there was someone else, one of Jose's brothers, that could have committed the crime, and they cast doubt on his guilt, that can get in the head of a jury. You think that's unlikely with a judge making the ultimate decision?
Very unlikely. A judge is going to see through that. And the defense's argument would be related to Ibarra's cell phone. And there is some evidence that Ibarra's brother and roommate, they did have access to that cell phone. They were logged into their Facebooks on the cell phone. And we know, of course, that cell phone traveled to the University of Georgia grad student apartment, then the park where Laken was murdered, and then back to Ibarra's apartment with Laken's cell phone. So that cell phone is very powerful because it shows the path of the murderer. So really the only possible argument would be that someone else had access to that phone and they were the real killer. But as you see, we have an alibi for Ibarra's brother, and the state's going to do the same thing for anyone else that had access to the phone. And the fingerprint, the DNA, the blood, there's just so much evidence in this case. It's really overwhelming. So the defense's only real shot would maybe convince 1 out of 12 jurors of some sort of doubt, but that's not going to happen with a judge in a bench trial.
The evidence does appear, as you say, Neama, so strong. Why is the prosecution focusing so much on her clothes and the possibility that the attacker tried to sexually assault her?
Well, that was the motive here, right? We're talking about an attempted rape. We believe that was the motive. Obviously, that's why he was targeting the young woman. And let's be honest, Laken was targeted in this case. It wasn't just a murder. It was an attempted rape. So I think it's important to tell the full story. And it's also important to show that the DNA and the blood was on the killer's clothes. This wasn't something that, you know, hey, it's just not an identity case. It's just not a cell phone cell site case. There's direct evidence here in terms of the DNA, the blood, the fingerprint that ties Jose Ibarra to this murder. So in addition to the cuts and abrasions on his arms as well.
We have seen him remain emotionless in court, and if in fact that is him in the video, as the prosecution alleges, he's very calm as he walks the trail after the murder of Laken Riley. Do you think that there is any possibility he takes the stand in his own defense as a last-ditch effort to save himself in his case?
I don't think so. That would be a Hail Mary type defense. And you've said it, both when he was committing the murder and even in the body cam footage when officers came to question him. First, there was an officer, then he didn't speak Spanish, brought one of his colleagues in. Zero emotion, and wasn't what you would typically see. And same thing in the courtroom. Following this case, you know, we're seeing these shocking videos of just horrific violence and no emotion from the defendant, Jose Ibarra. I think he's probably accepted his fate, that he's going to spend the rest of his life in Georgia State Prison.
Neama Rahmani, thank you as always. Appreciate you stopping by on this. We're going to continue to follow what happens in the courtroom as the prosecution presents its final witnesses, and then the defense will have their turn.